Section 3. In this section, we'll look thoroughly at packaging, marking, and labeling regulated medical waste. Packaging, marking, and labeling regulated medical waste is regulated by OSHA and the Department of Transportation. As has been stated previously, however, particularly in this section, you may have additional state and local regulatory requirements that may differ from the federal guidelines discussed in this training. OSHA regulates regulated medical waste to ensure the occupational safety of all employees coming in contact with RMW. OSHA's bloodborne pathogens standard outlines requirements for sharps containers and regulated medical waste containment. Because of this, it's recommended you complete the bloodborne pathogens training on an annual basis. To review, the Bloodborne Pathogens Standard, 29 CFR 1910.1030, states the following regarding sharps containers. Contaminated sharps shall be discarded immediately or as soon as possible in containers that are closable, puncture-resistant, leak-proof on the sides and bottom, and labeled or color-coded in accordance with the respective CFR regulations. During use, the containers should be easily accessible to personnel and located as close as is feasible to the immediate area where sharps are used or can be reasonably anticipated to be found, maintained upright throughout use, and replaced routinely and not be allowed to overfill. When moving containers of contaminated sharps from the area of use, the containers should be closed immediately prior to removal or replacement to prevent spillage or protrusion of contents during handling, storage, transport, or shipping. Placed in a secondary container if leakage is possible. And the second container shall be constructed to contain all contents and prevent leakage during handling, storage, transport, or shipping, and labeled or color-coded in accordance with the respective CFR regulations. Reusable containers shall not be opened, emptied, or cleaned manually or in any other manner which would expose employees to the risk of percutaneous injury. Additionally, the CFR states that non-sharps regulated waste shall be placed in containers which are closable, constructed to contain all contents and prevent leakage of fluids during handling, storage, transport, or shipping, labeled or color-coded in accordance with the respective CFR regulations, closed prior to removal to prevent spillage or protrusion of contents during handling, storage, transport, or shipping. If outside contamination of the regulated waste container occurs, it shall be placed in a second container, and this secondary container shall follow all of the rules of the primary container. Finally, the CFR states that disposal of all regulated waste shall be in accordance with applicable regulations of the United States, states and territories, and political subdivisions of states and territories. In 49 CFR 172.700, the Department of Transportation regulates regulated medical waste to ensure that the transportation of regulated medical waste will be done in a safe manner. The DOT regulations cover two functions: one, preparing the package for transport, and two, signing the shipping papers. This implies that the items being shipped or transported have been properly prepared for safe shipping. The DOT hazardous materials regulations apply to all shipments of hazardous materials in commerce. In commerce includes loading, moving, unloading, and storing any shipments of hazardous materials that are under active shipping papers, up until the point that these materials are unloaded from the transporter's truck onto the receiving entity's property. Please note, the DOT uses the term hazardous waste when referencing regulated medical waste. Regulated medical waste transporters using a vehicle exclusively for regulated medical waste are not included in all of the requirements for PHMSA DOT hazmat transportation regulations, but must follow the requirements outlined in 49 CFR 173.24 and 173.24a, which are the general requirements for packaging and packages. To ensure compliance with this exception, the vehicle used for the transport of RMW must not contain other hazardous material. The packaging should be durable and secure enough to keep the public and environment safe during transportation. Markings and labels must indicate the material being transported. All regulated medical waste containers must be rigid, leak-resistant, impervious to moisture, burst, tear, and break resistant, sealed to prevent leakage during transport, and puncture resistant for sharps. Packaging regulated medical waste in corrugated boxes. All RMW packaged for disposal must be in a container that is lined. The liner or bag must be strong enough to resist tearing. The liner or bag should overlap all four sides of the outer container. The liner or bag must be red in color with a universal biohazard symbol on the outer container in accordance with all regulations. Sharps must be placed in an approved sharps container. These must be placed in a leak-proof secondary or outer container. An exception to this would be if a sharps container with a leak-proof gasket is being used. The liner or bag must be properly tied or sealed by twisting the neck of the bag and tying a knot to ensure the inner contents cannot leak if the tied bag is turned upside down. All primary and secondary containers must be closed. It's suggested that boxes be sealed with 2-inch packaging tape, and the weight of the box should not exceed 50 pounds. The following are the labeling requirements for regulated medical waste. OSHA labeling requirements for the primary or inner container are discussed in CFR 1910.1030. Section 1910.1030 states, warning labels shall be affixed to containers of regulated waste, refrigerators, and freezers containing blood or other potentially infectious material, and other containers used to store, transport, or ship blood or other potentially infectious materials, except as provided in paragraph G, 1, I, E, F, and G. Labels required by this section shall include the following universal biohazard symbol. These labels shall be fluorescent orange or orange red or predominantly so, with lettering and symbols in contrasting color. Labels should be affixed as close as feasible to the container by string, wire, adhesive, or other method that prevents their loss or unintentional removal. Paragraph E states, red bags or red containers may be substituted for labels. Paragraph F states, containers of blood, blood components, or blood products that are labeled as to their contents and have been released for transfusion or other clinical use are exempted from the labeling requirements of this paragraph. Paragraph G states, individual containers of blood or other potentially infectious materials that are placed in a labeled container during storage, transport, shipment, or disposal are exempted from the labeling requirement. Secondary or outer containers must include the following information and must be printed or placed on a label on all secondary containers. The biohazard symbol, regulated medical waste, NOS, not otherwise specified, UN 3291, the word biohazard, and 2 arrows pointing up. The secondary containers must include the generator's facility name, address, and phone number, as well as the transporter's name, address, phone number, and permit number. Also included must be the date of the shipment and the type of regulated medical waste. These should be pre-printed on the box or written on a water-resistant label. Once again, a reminder that state regulations may differ from the requirements within this training. Also, as a general rule, where there's an overlap between the OSHA mandated label and the DOT required label, the DOT label will be considered acceptable on the outside of the transport container, provided the OSHA mandated label appears on any internal containers which may be present. Containers serving as collection receptacles within a facility must bear the OSHA label since these are not covered by the DOT requirements. Please ensure you are educated on your state-specific regulations.